1, 2, 3, yeah! This is Amari Purple Talk. Yes. Welcome to episode 78 of Amari Purple Talk, a podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical singularity. I'm Richard Cole, your imagination funk soloist. Thank you once again for tuning in. Please leave your comments in the comment section below, and please download on your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And please continue to send your questions or topic suggestions for Amari Purple Talk. And how you can do that is by clicking the link in the show notes below, either the website link for Amari Communications or by following me on Twitter at RichardCole_now using the hashtag Amari Purple Talk. And your topic or question might just be read in a future episode. All right. And before we start with today's topic, we are reaching the end of the Prince Twitter thread focusing on the vault tracks for the Sign of the Times Super Deluxe Edition. Later today, we will have Edgar Cruz discussing the song Walking in Glory. And then on February 18th, we will have the Press Rewind podcast discussing the track Wally. Yep, the classic track, maybe not the original track, but still a legendary vault track nonetheless. And that will conclude our Prince Twitter thread. And as always, thanks once again to DJ UMB and Edgar Cruz for inviting me to participate in the previous Twitter threads. And Amari Purple Talk listeners, if you haven't had a chance to check out these Twitter threads, by all means, check them out. So go on Twitter, hashtag Prince Twitter thread, and just sit back and enjoy. And now with that out of the way, we will start the show. And today we are going to focus on two classic pieces of very early Prince material. These are recordings, basically, it's a young Prince, making his bones, just learning his way around the studio, getting signed to Warner Brothers, and then working on the first album. But out of those formative years, basically, the only things that have been officially released are, of course, Prince's debut album on Warner Brothers, which is For You. And then there is the 94 East album that it's been re-released in many different forms. The first set started surfacing around the time of Purple Rain, at the height of Purple Rain. And, it could be seen as kind of a cash grab, especially back then. But now with hindsight, and I think a lot of things had been worked out with Prince during his lifetime, or maybe some things have been worked out with the estate. Not really sure on the details. But the way that particular release exists in its current form, that is one I encourage, especially if you're a Prince completist. It's one I encourage you to check out. And if you're a fan of that sort of mid-70s period, by all means, check it out. Of course, this project was spearheaded by Pepe Willie, And for those Prince historians, or if you newbies out there aren't familiar with Pepe Willie, he's one of the key figures in pre-record deal signing Prince era. That was, one of the individuals that was very instrumental in allowing Prince an opportunity to have studio time and learn about how working in a recording studio works, getting that formative experience. And, kind of, the more that we learn about those years through various books that have come out over the last maybe 10, 15 years or so, is a very interesting fellow to check out. He's not really trying to grab a lot of the spotlight, not really trying to cash in heavily, on the Prince name or anything like that. But in his own words, all he wants is just to be that answer in the form of a question on Jeopardy. It's like, who was the person that worked with Prince before he was signed with Warner Brothers? Who was Pepe Willie? And, sometimes we forget, we have this person that's a genius, and the talent was always there. But you have to get from point A to point B. And without some of those early figures like a Pepe Willie, Owen Huntsney, the first manager, Chris Moon, individuals like that. Of course, Andre Simone's mother, Bernadette. Without those figures, you take any one of those people out of the equation, the Prince universe or the Prince musical singularity might be a little different than what we have within this current timeline. And Pepe Willie's resume it's pretty impressive. His uncle was a founding member of Little Anthony and the Imperials, and basically Pepe's introduction to the music business was through being a gopher, for the group. And, later he had some attempts to breaking into the music business himself, a couple of opportunities to be signed. And basically, the music business, even now, even probably even more so now, it's a harder business to break into. And sometimes it's not always about how talented you are, but just being at the right place at the right time with the right people. And, there's been some kind of false starts and some missed opportunities within his career. But again, it put him in the position to be in Minneapolis and sort of encounter this group, Grand Central, which had Prince and Andre Simone and Morris Day, and kind of, pass on what he learned. Sometimes you need those figures in your life to, just give you that little bit of information. And then once you have that information, you integrate it into your own personal experience, then, yeah, you might be in the position to start moving mountains at that point. And, he had an opportunity to work with a gentleman by the name of Hank Cosby, one of the original Motown musicians, part of the Funk Brothers. If you look at kind of some of the mid to late 60s recordings of Stevie Wonder, there's Hank Cosby with like a co-production credit or a co-songwriting credit. You see that name kind of pop up in some Jackson 5 deep cuts, some of the Motown era deep cuts of the Jackson 5. But again, it was just never meant to be. But you can also say that there is some, like I said, he's got that Jeopardy question or Jeopardy answer in the form of a question. by writing the song that ended up being called Do Yourself a Favor. Originally it was called If You See Me, which is a track that is on the 94 East, or at least this configuration of the 94 East compilation. First, Prince did a version of it, stayed in the vault until the release of the 1999 Super Deluxe Edition, and now has been officially released as one of the vault tracks on that set. But before then, Jesse Johnson took a crack at it, and it's a deep album cut that's on Shockadelica, known and loved by many. So, at least there was some success as a songwriter, some benefits to some of that early material. But in the midst of, like I said, trying to get that deal for himself and recording demos and recording tracks for projects, he utilized Prince on guitar for a lot of those tracks that are on the 94 East project. And there are some songs with both Prince and Andre Simone. And, of course, the one track, like I said, back in 1984, as a way to sort of capitalize on the whole Purple Rain momentum, the track Just Another Sucker, which was co-written by Prince and Pepe Willie. So the 94 East album, I originally had as a cassette when it was called Minneapolis Genius, the 94 East. I can't remember what the title was, but that I don't have the cover or the case, but I think the cassette's still laying around somewhere. And I guess with my mindset, like I said, we were all on that sort of Purple Rain high still, even as late as whatever, 84, 85, we were still vibing off of that. And I don't know, I really, besides Just Another Sucker, it was just kind of a thing of, well, if Prince isn't singing on it, okay, it's cool, he's playing on it or whatever. And I get it, these are the early recordings. But I think just because, we had Purple Rain and we had all the B-sides, 17 Days, Roddick City, all that was coming out. Another Lonely Christmas, and then going into 85, Around the World in a Day, and then here comes The Family, and here comes Sheila E, so Jesse coming out with something, Moore's coming out with stuff. It was so much going on just with the Minneapolis sound in general, that it was one of those things that got lost in the shuffle for me. But just kind of over the last few years, I started becoming more interested in that, sort of pre-fame or pre-record deal era Prince, because you have that sort of legend with a few artists, not every single artist. It's a thing of, there's some artists, it's like, yeah, they had the talent, but there's no like really, early demos or anything that would be of significance. You have Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff with the Isley Brothers and, Little Richard and certain sessions, that have been on bootlegs, or now the Hendrix estate has officially released in some form or another, or included certain tracks on a box set, that type of thing. You had the Beatles that one of their earliest recordings was backing up a guy called Tony Sheridan, and they're the band and the background vocals on his album. Maybe John got to sing a lead vocal on one track. They got to do an instrumental on another track, and that became legendary. There's also their Hamburg, an appearance they did in Hamburg in '62 that was sort of a bootleg recording. So, but that era was just as legendary as the stuff that was going on when these guys were famous. You also had Elvis to a degree, where you've had the Sun Records period. But, once he signed to RCA and then came out with Heartbreak Hotel, those Sun recordings was sort of like this thing that was sort of circulating. And the good thing is that we have something like that with Prince with these 94 East sessions, where you see a young artist, 16, 17, 18, 19, almost not even 20 yet. Well, the first album, we'll get to For You in a minute, but you have this artist, that's basically making his bones. He's getting this studio experience. He's learning what goes into a recording session. We've all at some point or another, once we start really getting into music, we start looking at the liner notes, and then we kind of start forming an idea of like, man, what's it like in the studio? Then either you kind of get to be in a studio and really see how it's done, or you get a hold of bootlegs of your favorite artists and you hear, oh, this is take 2, this is take 23. And then you hear the banner and like, oh, well, we need more guitar here, or put more echo on the vocals or whatever. So this is sort of Prince's Hamburg period with the 94 E sessions. And again, it's a nice piece of music to have, just as a completist standpoint. Or I wouldn't be surprised if some of these songs don't resurface on a box set at some point. If they do like a career spanning box set, where the first or part of the first disc not only includes Prince's various demos that got him signed to Warner Brothers, and a couple of unreleased tracks that didn't make it onto For You or even the second Prince album. But I wouldn't be surprised if something like Just Another Sucker would be on that box set, if they decide to do something like that. The material where he plays guitar, of course, you have the track If You See Me, which again ended up being Do Yourself a Favor. And then there's another track called Better Than You Think. Now, of course, again, Prince isn't singing on it. He's a hired hand. He's a session musician. So it's kind of comparable to, say, what Jimi Hendrix was doing on, the Isley Brothers or the Little Richard section or sessions. And, to me, I think Pepe really has a really great ear for sounds, for music. The production is what it is. But, there are some songs in there, of course, like I said, Do Yourself a Favor. Keep going back to that one. Better Than You Think. Somebody should pick up on that even now. The background vocals, it sounds very Bootsy's Rubber Band to me, which is cool. And, I would like to hear, you hear Pepe Willie singing on the track. And again, it's a good track. It's, it's a good song. But, I would love to hear, like, say, like a Bootsy Collins maybe tackle that. Or, just somebody with, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it or the words to it. But something with that sort of character, that sort of extra something that, say, like a Bootsy Collins would have to it, maybe somebody like Morris Day. I think Morris Day could tackle that. It's a good ballad, and I think in the hands of a Morris Day or Bootsy Collins, that would make a really great deep track, deep album cut track. That would just help the flow of an artist's album that's on it. And then you also have the stuff where, Prince and Andre, where Andre's on bass, Prince is on guitar. And let's see, and I believe those tracks, They're playing on the song Lovin' Cup, and of course, Just Another Sucker, and Dance to the Music of the World. And again, they also play on If You Feel Like Dancing and One Man Jam. And these songs actually were intended for Tony Sylvester, one of the members of the Main Ingredient. But again, breaking in the music industry, it's not a walk in the park. It's not a very easy thing. And again, no matter how great of a talent you are, and for a lot of people that even kind of throw a little shade on Prince proteges, it's like, to use a basketball analogy, basically the player that's on the bench that's only making $100,000, maybe barely 250 grand. It's safe to say that person just sitting on the bench in the NBA can play basketball 50 times better than you ever will. And that goes the same for a lot of the and I'm talking about the ones with some significant weight, like The Time, like a Sheila E., like a Jill Jones, where they have a voice or they're so proficient at their instrument, members of the St. Paul, they are so proficient on their instruments. Not everybody gets to be the superstar. Nobody gets to the echelon of a Michael Jackson or Prince or James Brown, Jackie Wilson, Temptation, whoever. Tina Marie, Diana Ross, whoever. Nobody easily gets to that level. And, there's people, like them that were able to survive it for decades. But there's people that can get to that level for even, 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years and survive it. And just the fact that we have a lot of these people still here, that speaks volumes. We're still at a point to where we can, if it can happen, the original 7 members of The Time, they all have a certain level of success, whether as The Time or their various solo acts. St. Paul has a certain level of success. Not everybody's cut out for the 20 million and 100 million and $500 million deals and this and that. But, it's not an easy business. Even people that have been there, like your George Clintons, Mavis Staples, they get to a point where the industry just stops caring. It becomes a form of ageism. Where it's like, oh, well, just because they're a certain age, the kids aren't going to buy the records or whatever. And that's just a bunch of crock, because these kids these days are finding this music, and they're finding it to be a lot more real than the stuff that these industries and radio stations are trying to force feed them as well. So all of that rant to say, it's not an easy business. And that's not to say that you can't find a measure of success. The bottom line is finding that level of success that makes you happy. It's not about the 20 million and the 500 million. If you get to do what you love, and you're not, say, even if you are sort of doing your responsibility gig, you're doing your responsibility gig because it's keeping your lights on, and because your lights are on, you're able to go in and craft that song or write that film or whatever it is, whatever you dream of, you can do that. And again, to have this cat get to 2021 and be in a position to say, hey, hey, I had a little bit to do with getting Prince started. And hey, I don't want anything. Hey, I got these 94 East tracks, and, that's historical. And hey, all I want is just to be that answer to the Jeopardy question. That's it. And that's a good thing. But hey, I enjoy this record. The more that I've been listening to it, and I think when I sort of dug it out just to have something to listen to prepare for a previous episode, this is about maybe a month ago. The more I started listening to this, then it's like, man, this is one of those that takes you back. And like I said, they're really good songs. And I can see, had this been released, now, I'm all of, whenever these things were recorded, all of 11, 10 or 11 or something like that. But say if this was something that made it to radio, or, somebody would have put this album within my radar, then this is one of those, I would just put on and just mellow out to, and just be kind of cool with it, just like, just having some peaceful sounds, and a lot of these things you could easily hear elements of things that end up on the Quiet Storm. There's a track, I forget which one. I think it's If You Feel Like Dancing. I think that one. There's elements in that remind me of GQ's Disco Nights. There's something in that rhythm arrangement that reminds me of that. What else? There's maybe it's the One Man Jam. I forget that one. But there's one you hear that sort of do 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 do. It's like that ended up on some Time records at some point. So I don't know. Maybe Prince was reminiscing and was like, "Hey, I remember that little groove I played. Let me make something out of that." And like I said, that little riff ended up on some Time albums too. So, I mean, there's something that, like I said, it's one of those few pieces where even though I'm discovering it very late, that it's just the energy of that, or the frequency of that period, comes through so well. It puts you there like I always had it there. And that's going to bring me to the For You album. Because you've heard me say this a million times, where I heard Soft and Wet on the radio, and it was at a time when it would be in that block of songs, and I'm coming in the middle of that block, so I hear this song, and I'm like, damn, that's great. Who is it? So I never, so it would have been different if I had found out who that was and went to go seek that record out. And especially like around 77, 78, it reminds me of when Peter Brown was out. And with the Do You Want to Get Funky, and then with Dance With Me, those songs were just always on the radio, that I had to have those singles. Eventually, many years later, I ended up getting the album. But yeah, I remember, like, once I found out who that was, it was like, okay, I gotta have those singles, and ended up with those singles. And Soft and Wet would have been one of those had I known who it was. And that was an album, like I said, because Dirty Mind was my gateway. And again, the same person that put me on to that record, maybe within that year, had borrowed both the first albums, maybe less time than that, but borrowed those two albums, For You and Prince. And I was able to play catch up that way. So, here it is, like 81 going into 82. And then I'm hearing all of For You for the first time. And really paying attention to the second Prince album at the same time. And then eventually, maybe within two more years, getting the vinyl just to complete my set at that time. And For You, these days, when I listen to it, it's like it has always been there. Like I can, it felt like, me having the car wash soundtrack and playing that, and then all of a sudden, once I'm done with that, getting For You and putting it on, even though I never had the For You album. So it's one of those, just like I said, weird frequency things that occurs in music. But again, it's that gateway album. For a lot of people, were there from day one. A lot of the fan base. And a lot of us came in later. Like I'm Dirty Mind. A lot of people came in through 1999. A lot of people came in through Purple Rain. A lot of people came in through Musicology, ironically. But again, the For You album is just that gem. It's that first one. No, it's Prince making his bones still. It's like, yeah, he had the studio experience with Pepe Willie, with Chris Moon, recording demos, getting signed with Warner Brothers. They're putting him through the process because he wants to produce his own material. They're not sure if they should take a chance on the kid. Let's see, who is that? Mo Austin? Is that passed away this past week? The guy that took that chance with Prince to allow a kid to come in and just be able to produce and handle everything regarding his own album. The only other artist to do that, to be that sort of one-man band, and I would say maybe the closest in age to Prince at that time would have been Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder was 21 when he got that creative freedom, that creative independence to produce and write and perform his own material. The Beatles broke up, and that allowed Paul McCartney to do his first album like that. So, here's Paul McCartney at 28 doing that. So, but here you have Prince, who was just on the verge of turning 20, doing that. I think the only person to kind of break that record might be Teddy Riley to have done it. He might have been about 17 or 18 producing, for other people, even before Guy started. But again, here's this sort of piece that sort of gets lost in the shuffle. It's like, oh yeah, For You. Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, well, it's not controversy. It's not Dirty Mind, but yeah, first album, whatever. But, when I listen to a lot of songs, and now, for some weird reason, a lot of songs from that sort of, 75, 76, 77, 78, even 79, a lot of those songs are kind of re-entering my orbit for some reason. The Bee Gees main course album. It's like, I've been playing that on the streaming services a lot. Doobie Brothers, I'm getting back into. The year before, because I wanted Shaka Khan in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year, and I voted again for her this year. Just a lot of those sounds with Rufus, then reading The Beautiful Ones, having Rufusized, him name checking that as his favorite Rufus Shaka Khan album. And then writing about that, listening to that, just kind of all those 70s sounds now. Kind of whether it's kind of a thing of taking that sort of positive energy from that period and integrating it into now, because we need some kind of, we all need positive energy. It's too much weird and crazy stuff going on whether it stems from the pandemic, whether it stems from systemic racism, or just trying to figure out how to get through the day. It's like those sounds, they're comforting, And it's also weird too, because a lot of that, like I said, I'm 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And, whatever you go through at 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, you going through that. And then here's some of the greatest music on earth as your soundtrack. Again, it's a comfort, but then it also brings up a lot of good vibes, a lot of, weird, insecure stuff, that you go through growing up and everything. So it's like, okay, why is this energy coming back now? But like I said, I like to think of it as like, okay, it's time to take that positive energy and turn it into something, or channel it into something. Or if that certain era or that certain song brings a hell of amount of comfort, then that's what's needed to kind of get through whatever's going on. Like I said, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with everything else that's going on in the world like that. So, and, speaking of the Beautiful One's book, it's, I wish again that there were another, 150 pages or 200 pages, or at least enough pages to cover the recording of the For You album. Because there are a lot of books that, that touch on that era. And there are a lot of, funny anecdotes, about, Prince being the practical joker. And then there's stories about the album being over budget. But what we don't get is what he was actually feeling, what it actually felt like to be recording your first album. You get glimpses of that based on, sort of his handwritten notes, the photographs he took for his scrapbook. You kind of get the feeling, you get the energy of it, but to kind of have him tell it, and you're getting it, or the emotion or the feeling or the thoughts that are conveyed through his own words, would have been very fascinating. Again, what led to certain decisions. If you have the book, again, there'll be spoilers, but I would, it's safe to say that by now, just about everyone has bought the book and actually had a chance to read it. But in that section, after you get his 50 handwritten pages, then it goes, or it segues into the For You era. And all you have are just kind of like handwritten notes regarding putting the album together. There's a diagram of how he wanted his background vocals layered. To me, that page alone is just, that drawing alone is a masterclass, because he's so brilliant at layering his vocals, even for then. But even again, like I said, even the photographs, you get a sort of a vibe of the work that was being done. You get a vibe of sort of the fun, because it's like, now you sign that record deal, you sign on the dotted line, you got that advance check, and now you're recording your first album. You're able to buy a car. It wasn't anything brand new, but it's your first car. He was sensible to buy like something used at first. And what was it like to record that? What led to the decision to write certain songs? What influenced certain songs? And it's kind of it's a tragedy that we don't get that perspective of it. Maybe, since Andre Simone was there now, how was that communicated? Did Prince say, okay, hey, look, I got this song. Did Andre help out? Did he play bass on some of the tracks or whatever? Did he run it by him like, hey, this, I got this idea for a song and I want to go in this direction, and who was the influence? What was the influence? Because again, in those notes, there's one of the earliest track listings would have been to include a cover of the song "Send in the Clowns," which a song I was never a fan of. But it's like, wow, he wanted to cover that. How would that would have been? What would that would have sounded like? And two, you have the comparisons as well, and that would have been interesting to get a gauge on how he reacted to the reaction to the record. What the critics were saying, because basically, it was, the Michael Jackson comparison. There was the Bee Gees comparison. There was the Smokey Robinson comparison. And then, too, there was the comparison with Stevie Wonder. I mean, Prodigy playing all the keyboards and playing all the instruments. But, to me, I hear, a kid just working it out. Just finding his own voice. There's a lot of original material on there. It's not, nothing to me seems derivative. My Love Is Forever, that track, yeah, it's got a little Bee Gees thing to it. Baby to a Point, I would say, has maybe some of the Smokey Robinson kind of vibe to it as well. But other than that, I just hear, that is taking his influences and making his own. A lot of thought goes into that first album, and that goes true for just about any artist. You put more thought into that than really you do the other ones, because it's like, this is the first one. And for a lot of artists, it's that sort of first real studio experience as well. But you dream about that first one. You work hard for that first one. And yeah, it's great for a debut. We live in a world now where the success is so instant. It's like you have to be a superstar on your first album out. And, this was a time period where, you pay some dues. You take a group like the Bee Gees, where they had some success in the 60s. But then there was that sort of period like in the early to mid 70s where it just wasn't working. It wasn't gelling. And it was like starting over. You get artists like that too. You get maybe 2 or 3 albums that are just a big deal. And then you get, you hit that sort of slump. And then you go through that for about 2 or 3 albums. And then you come back and it's like, you're cemented in music history. This is your superstar level. And you get that sort of, 3 to 5 album run where, you can do no wrong with it. But, the early days of artist development, that is a lost cause now. Unless you're totally independent, do you get that opportunity to really just kind of develop and grow, where you kind of have that fan base for the first one and it just builds from there. But it back then, that's how it was done. And again, you see where with Dirty Mind, he found his lane. Like, okay, this is what's going to work. This is what's going to set me apart from everybody else in the industry. Where, yeah, granted, the first 2, depending on your point of view, yeah, it got lost in the shuffle. They had some success. Soft and Wet was a top 20 hit. I Want to Be Your Lover was a top 10 pop hit. And I think it might have been number one as R&B. I can't remember. But there was some success with both of those albums to a degree. But, you had other things going on. You still had Parliament Funkadelic that was still riding high. You still had, or you had groups like Switch that were, coming out of the box. They'll Never Be and stuff like that. And you had the Commodores still riding high. And you had the Jacksons that were still riding high. So it was easy for those albums to get lost in the shuffle. But, for a music fan, a music connoisseur, and especially at that early of an age, you're talking 77, 78, 79, where I was listening to Rolls Royce and I was listening to Parliament Funkadelic and Heat Wave and, of course, the Jacksons. Like I said, those were some albums. Or, even if I was just listening to stuff on the radio, because, I didn't get like an allowance, or anything like that. So it wasn't like I could afford to get everything that came out by whoever I liked. The radio was that sort of saving grace. But sometimes I would end up, where, a relative or something just buys you a record or gives you a record. And it's just kind of like, what's this all about? And, I remember having records like that, but it wasn't like they were part of my main rotation the way a Parliament Funkadelic record would be, or the Jacksons would be. It would be just one of those things where it's like, okay, need a little something different, a little different vibe. Who is this? Let me put this record on. And like I said, just vibe off of it. And it was just this personal thing, it was like, didn't matter if everybody else thought that record was cool or thought it was hip or whatever. It was just that I enjoyed it, and it was something different. And then kind of as you get into, teenage college years, you have that artist or you have those bands where they kind of belong, you feel like they belong to you, because it's like it's not what the mainstream is into. It's that underground thing. And nobody gets that record but you. Maybe one or two people, and you form friendships, lifelong friendships off of that, because you got that, like, hey, we're the only two people on earth that like this record, and you live off of that. To me, For You would have been one of those, had that actually ended up in my orbit, say, spring, summer of 1978, I would have been, bumping Heat Wave, and then I would have put that on. There's Graham Central Station albums, Larry Graham albums that would have been in my orbit at that time, just to have that vibe. And it had that sort of weird green record label, the Warner Brothers label of the studio lot. That's nothing says mid to late, early to mid 70s than that label right there. That also, Bootsy's Rubber Band was on that Warner Brothers, had that Warner Brothers label to it. And like I said, it was just nothing like being around in that time and having that music unfold in real time. To just, you felt good, you felt good. Or if you were feeling good, you felt better. If you were feeling better, you felt great. If you were down, then those sounds made you forget whatever it was you were down about. And that's the thing, like I said, if you're into 70s music, that's definitely a gem to have. Again, if you're a Prince completist, nothing beats having that very first album. A lot of people include it as part of the classic Warner Brothers run. It may start with Dirty Mind and end at, say, Love Sexy, or to some it starts at For You and ends at Graffiti Bridge. But there's just an innocence to that first record. Um, there's some nice sounds to that record. Sometimes you just don't need a super heavy hit record hitting you over the head, no matter how great that hit record is. Sometimes you just want to just chill. And like I said, when you hear the acapella voices, multi-layered, that starts the track, and then it goes right into In Love, and then into Soft and Wet, and then Crazy You, and flip it over, then you have I'm Yours, Love Is Forever. Also, Just As Long As We're Together. It's 70, it's him working it out, and there's the bones of the song, the verse, chorus, bridge, and then for Just As Long As We're Together and I'm Yours, there's just this groove, and he's letting he's putting his foot down, he's planting the flag right there, like, yes, this is me playing all of the instruments, and I'm playing all of the instruments well. And this is my first album. So that's it. I just wanted to give a little shine the purple spotlight on both of those projects. I think they are just as important as any other era, whether it's classic Warner Brothers era, whether it's, the artist formerly known as Prince era, anything in the 2000s. This was the starting point. This was the origin story, and it's documented in sound. And again, like I said, I think kind of as we get more into, if Sony or the estate or whoever does it, like a career spanning box set, you'll start to get those, like some of the 94 East stuff, definitely the For You material, any outtakes, vault tracks from that period, demos, it'll give that era some shine. And also too, like I said, regardless of what your favorite era is, if you're a completist, it's paying attention to that era. And two, if we have The Beautiful Ones as a reference, that book, if other people come out with books, if Dwayne Tudall does a book or volume dealing with that era, we'll probably get some more perspective or a deeper perspective of it. Or as we kind of see, really see the timeline as far as the sessions, then that'll be a nice companion piece to The Beautiful Ones. And we'll start to get more of a picture. Or if anybody does a biography and does the proper research and interviews the right people, we can still piece together maybe what was he feeling like during that era, what was that experience like, or we'll get a little bit closer to the vibe or the energy of that period. But again, it's some good peaceful music, the 94 East stuff, some good, funky grooves, some kind of Afro-Cuban type feel, some good Quiet Storm stuff, just something to just chill to. And then For You, again, it's a kid working it out, but he's got his eyes to the top of the mountain, to get that fame, that success, to achieve everything that he set out to do. And this was that first step towards doing that professionally. But what's most important is, what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to experience both albums? Do you enjoy both albums? Are they something that you would like to get into, especially after hearing this episode, or you've heard a lot about it and haven't had a chance to listen? By all means, jump on your favorite streaming service and check both of these albums out. Also, maybe go buy the physical media. of both of those. But definitely leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. And that is going to wrap up this episode of Amari Purple Talk. Also, check out my review. This will be a 3-part review. The Jacksons, they have reissued their first 3 albums on Epic Records, but only on digital. But I'll be reviewing the first one. That will have Enjoy Yourself, Show You the Way to Go, a couple of other great tracks. So be sure to check out my YouTube channel on Amari Communications and view that first review. And also check out my website, amaricommunications.com, and just check out what's going on. I've got a book of poetry. I've got merchandise. I did all the graphics myself on it. Buy an Amari Purple Talk t-shirt, coffee mug, mask. There's Amari Communications t-shirts and gear and masks as well. Pick up an item, pick up a few items. All the proceeds help keep this show going, all my other projects, and will help generate material that will continue to make you feel good. You will have my eternal thanks. Also, too, let's try to have love for one another. Let's make this planet much, much better than how we found it. Be safe. And as always, keep it purple and on the one.